Hey everybody, Tony D and little Joan in the background somewhere, and this is some more writing tips, I guess you could say. I did a fanfic thing yesterday about how damaging I think fanfic is, and John Adams, no relation, I assume, wrote, I really enjoyed this. I would appreciate a series that digs a bit further into wins and missteps of various stories as a way to impart lessons of better plot production. Well, that's kind of what I do with the screenwriter's rant, but um, with this movie here, and I talked about it in my trailer analysis, but I'll dig down into, and I've done this before in my screenwriting tips video. I guess you could call this a screenwriting tip, but I'm going to delve into it again. And it's basically, what are the rules of a ghost? What are the rules of the supernatural? What are the rules of your movie? And what does that mean? When I talk about that, every world that you create and each individual screenplay, novel, TV show, video game, comic book, they're all different worlds. They may cohabit other worlds. They may be part of the same world, like the Marvel universe is a big world, um, but they have certain rules that they follow that are consistent. So, in the easiest case of comic books, in the DC universe, Superman lives in Metropolis, and he always lives in Metropolis, and Gotham's in New Jersey, and that's where Batman lives, and it's crime ridden, whereas Metropolis is this shining city on a hill, and that's kind of the rules in the DC universe. Some of them. There are different rules in the Marvel and DC universe in terms of time travel, which I'll get into in another video. Stay away from that if you can. But when it comes to ghosts and the supernatural, it's really easy because you can write the rules, the physics of the supernatural. There are no set rules, there are no measurements. So, for instance, if you look at Ghostbusters, how do the physics in Ghostbusters work? Well, basically, Egon and Stans are the two nerds that come up with the scientific tools to capture ghosts. And the ghosts have always sort of been there on the fringes, but now, finally, Stans and Spengler create the technology that allows them to detect and capture them. They were sort of on the fringes for a long time, but their their uh, uh, their scientific breakthrough is really what allows the movie to happen. Because without that scientific breakthrough, they can't capture the ghost, right? Egon gets the exact measurements or whatever he gets. I don't know. He says a bunch of gobbledygook at the beginning of the movie. But that makes sense, and it only has to make movie sense. There's actual physics, and then there's movie physics. In movie physics, Ghostbusters perfectly legit, right? And that's enough to suspend your disbelief. Oh, okay, they figured it out scientifically. And why didn't anybody else figure it out? Well, they sort of indirectly address that. Nobody takes them seriously. Nobody funded this research for a long time. It was only Spengler and Stans to some extent, not really Bill Murray's character because he just grifts, um, that came up with it. So that's how you can allow the Ghostbusters to work. So how do they work? Well, you've seen the movie, I'm sure. The Ghostbusters, the ghosts can run through walls. They have all these crazy powers, but if they get too close to the Ghostbusters, they could zap them with their power packs. Uh, what the hell do they call them? I forget now. And trap them, and then put them in an electronic grid back in the fire station where they're trapped until the grid overloads or some idiot shuts off the power. Um, and that worked well in terms of tying it in to, they had some, Dan Aykroyd's character had some ancient not ancient, but old books and old gobbledygook. You know, like Egon's character, he did the scientific gobbledygook, and then Ray's character, he did the supernatural gobbledygook, and they kind of combined. Like he was the occult expert, Egon was the scientist. So together they're able to make that work, and it's a comedy movie, so you get a little more leeway on top of everything else. Now I just looked at We Have a Ghost. Those rules do not seem to be in place at all. None. Zero. Just seems to be like, oh, here's a ghost. Oh, we're going to put him on the internet. So this is the first ghost that anyone's ever put on the internet this clear. How did that happen? I don't think they address it in the movie. Maybe they do. I'm just guessing. But from the trailer, like, that's a pretty big revelation, right? That someone actually got a real ghost on film that looks real, that is legit, so to speak. So why? Why that? Why that ghost? Now, with the Ghostbusters, you get kind of the indirect explanation. Well, this is all fringe research. Nobody really puts money towards this. No one treats it seriously until these guys, and maybe you could surmise, like, well, the people who did treat it seriously, they weren't talented enough. The more talented scientists and experts went into other fields to make more money. In this, it's just kind of random. It's just kind of a family. Oh, yeah, we're going to put the ghost on the internet. Oh, my God, we're getting all these hits. Now we're super famous. Like, well, wait a minute. How did this not happen before? Everybody has access to the internet. You assume everybody has access to ghosts. Why did this ghost appear at that time? You need to address that if you're writing the rules of the ghost. If the ghost can move through walls, how can he ride in a car? Right. You're like, oh yeah, that's weird, right? And you might say, well, he would drop through the earth, wouldn't he? I don't know. Does gravity work on a ghost? What is a ghost is what you have to figure out. Even if you don't explain it all in a movie, you have to know it in the background. So when you write things, they're consistent. So whether you're doing a story, a movie, TV show, you have to know the rules and you have to stick to them. And that's part of the problem with Hollywood today. They don't care about the rules. They don't care about the continuity. As long as they get the right names in the right projects, it gets green light, everybody gets paid. Who cares? Well, the fans do. The fans care. The people who consume your product care. They watch the movie and they go, wait a minute. Why is Batman a different guy? Why is Batman killing people in this movie? He didn't do that before. And, you know, Hollywood's response to that, well, this is a different take on Batman, a better take. It's always a better take. Nobody announces, hey, we're going to do a worse take on Batman. But when you're talking about the physics of your universe, the rules, as I keep calling them, the rules have to be consistent. Or else, what's the point? If this character can go through walls and he can impact the physical world, he's kind of unstoppable. Why does he even need these kids in the plot of the movie to help him? He can do anything he wants. That thing that's keeping him here on Earth to avenge him, I don't know whether he's avenging his own murder or that he can appear in front of people. That's another thing. Like, why does he suddenly appear in front of all these people? Why can everybody see him? Apparently everybody can see him in this movie. That's another thing. It's like, that has to be addressed. Now, again, maybe the movie addresses that in some way. Maybe they disturb him, they get him on video, and because they get him in this moment, that's why everybody could see him, and because everybody sees him, now he could be seen by, you know, he's been seen by millions of people, therefore everybody can see him now. I don't know. There needs to be a logic to it, even though it's a supernatural, and it's really not rational or logic, right? There's no rationality behind ghosts. Um, you might believe in ghosts, but there's no scientific explanation for them. They are beyond our understanding, which is good for us as writers because then you can make the rules. And they just have to sound pretty good, right? They have to be within the ballpark of, they have to be serious enough that you can go, okay, I can accept that. I can suspend my disbelief and believe in your setup. In the case of Ghostbusters, yeah, we totally said, yeah, this works. Ray facilitates a lot of that by babbling on and on about the supernatural stuff, and Egon. A bunch of randos who just happen to move into this house, that's going to be a much tougher sell. They're going to have to come up with something. Now, it's a comedy movie, a family movie. Again, more leeway, but you only get so much leeway before people are watching your movie and halfway through it, they realize, I'm tuning out. I don't want to see the end of this. Click. You don't want that. You want people to be in a compelling story. So you have to give them, you have to lay the groundwork so at the end it makes sense. And you do most of that at the beginning of the movie. A lot of times when I'm working on a screenplay or a story, I get about 2/3 of the way through it, and then I realize what the story really is, and then I go back to the beginning and I start my rewrite at the head of the movie, and I start going through each scene with a fine-tooth comb and realizing what I'm headed for once I can see the ending. Usually, I'm working on a screenplay now. I hit about page 72, and I know how it's going to end. So now that I know how the movie's going to end, even though I haven't written it yet, I went back to the beginning and I went through the entire thing, and I start setting up little things that's going to either foreshadow the end or make the ending make more sense. In my particular case, I can't get into the details too much, but I need the particular drama to unfold on a particular day of the week. So, in order to make that work, I had to go back to the beginning of the screenplay and make more days pass before I get to the climax of the movie. And so basically the movie's going to take place over the course of a week. That is crucial to the story and what I'm saying, I realized. But I didn't realize that until I got to about page 72. I could say, okay, this is how I want to end this now. I need to be on this particular day. I need to be on this day to end it. So, for your ghosts or supernatural entity, you need rules like that. And you may have to get to the end of towards the end of the screenplay before you realize, oh yeah, that's what I should do. That's going to make it all work. Right? And for a ghost, it could be anything. It's usually something that's very specific to the ghost. There's a movie, if you ever saw it back in the 80s, it's pretty good. It's called House. And it's, the premise kind of is that the house is supernatural, but the ghost doesn't originate at the house. The character's haunted by his, I guess it's his ex-buddy from Vietnam who was left behind. He's haunting him. Now, he didn't die in the house. He died in Vietnam, but because the other character is in the house, it manifests somehow. And then they made a sequel to it. It was a strong enough sort of concept they could try to make a sequel. If you look at Poltergeist, the original Poltergeist movies, the premise of that movie is, I think, probably one of the strongest for ghosts, right? They're being haunted by ghosts. They don't know why. Horrible things happen throughout the movie, and it's at the climax of the movies, spoilers, the climax of the movie, that you find out why the family is being so severely haunted. And it's a great moment. It's a great moment in the movie. Never quite captured it in any of the sequels, but the first movie's so strong, kind of works. it kind of works, even for the sequels. For the first movie, it works great. And it's basically about a family trying to escape the ghost. And the ghosts, you realize, aren't that evil. They are trying to send a message and no one's hearing them, and they're getting increasingly frustrated. They also have a medium in the movie. This movie, We Have a Ghost, is kind of a parody of Poltergeist a little bit, because it has a medium, it has a ghost. It only has one ghost, but and it's got a little bit of Ghostbusters too. So that's another problem. When you sit down to write a movie and or any story, and you decide to pick at it like a buffet, right? I saw a bunch of movie about ghosts. I'll use something I saw in 13 Ghosts. Terrible movie in my opinion, by the way. Awful movie. They spend half the movie telling you there are 13 ghosts. Oh, there are 13? Oh no. They took a little bit from Ghostbusters. They take a couple of different things from Poltergeist and just general ghost movies, and they kind of throw them all in there. And a little bit, I think, from the Marvel movies, because it's kind of superhero-y in the ghost powers in this case. And they kind of throw that all together. Sometimes you can make that work, but there has to be a consistency to it. In a comedy, you have a lot more leeway. So you can basically say, well, we're doing a parody, right? And you're doing essentially homages to other ghost movies, even if they're comedies, by throwing a little bit of this in, a little bit of that. That can work if you're sending up ghost movies in a big way, but you have to be big with it. Like Scary Movies, kind of like that. That's a parody of the Scream movies and basically other horror movies. I think Saw's in there and a few other. More for the slasher movies, not necessarily the ghosts, but I think there were some ghost stuff in there as well. At some point, they were just throwing in everything, but the crazier it is, the funnier it is. Usually, the more leeway you have. As long as it's funny in a comedy, people are laughing. You're probably good. You're probably good. The problem, though, the difficulty in doing comedy, however, I know I'm giving a lot of advice today. The difficulty in doing comedy is you need common ground, right? So if you do a parody of Scream and half your audience hasn't seen Scream, they're not going to get it. That they added a medium in this movie, We Have a Ghost. The Poltergeist, one of the Poltergeist movies come out late 80s, early 90s. That's a long time. It's a long time for people to go, oh yeah, Poltergeist. Like, I remember it. I'm 56. Most of your audience probably isn't going to remember it. They're probably doing a parody of another movie that was aping Poltergeist that had a medium in it. Yeah. So, and Poltergeist probably had some stuff in it from other old movies. This is a thing in Hollywood. Some of it's like cool. You put in cool homages. Oh, that's an homage to this old ghost movie that the director liked. I wanted to throw in a tip of the hat to that. Everybody does it a little bit, but you got to be careful. You can't do it too much, or else you're just stealing bits from the other movies. You have to have your own voice. Does this movie have its own voice? We Have a Ghost? Maybe. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell. It feels more of like a vehicle for David Harbour. I called him Arbor in my other video. To run around and not talk, because he can't talk in the movie. I bet he talks at the end. I bet he thanks them and goes to the light. The other problem you may have with ghost movies is, how does that all work, right? And you have audiences these days that aren't very religious or openly hostile to religion in some cases. So if you end the movie on a happy note where the ghost, I'm seeing the light, I'm going to the light, some people are going to go, in which case, I don't even know why they would watch a ghost movie, because That's kind of the implication. Like if you have a ghost at all, it means you have a spirit or some kind of soul. If you have a soul, and not everybody who's ever died is walking around as a ghost, then you must go somewhere, probably to heaven or hell, at least in our current sort of paradigm. If you're going to introduce something new, like, well, no, Xenu takes us to a volcano or whatever, well, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do, Lucy. Um, so, getting back to the rules, you have to have rules. That would be part of the rules, too. What happens in the case of Ghost when they get their final reward? There's a great movie, a very underrated movie Robert Zemeckis did called The Frighteners, which is this crazy movie. It's almost like Ghostbusters in its own weird way. It's a little bit like the Sixth Sense meets Ghostbusters, if you can imagine that. Michael J. Fox plays a guy who can see ghosts, and only he can see them. He's, I don't know, psychic. I think he hit his head or something. And he has to solve murders that it turns out are being committed by a ghost. And then that ghost is also killing other ghosts, who then end up getting their final reward. It's a very odd movie, but it's good. I recommend it. Underrated. So the rules in the Frighteners are the ghost. I don't think they can affect the material world too much, but they can talk to Michael J. Fox and tell him of things and warn him of things, and talk to other ghosts or see other dead people. You also have Beetlejuice, right? That was another ghost movie, you'll recall. What were the rules of that? Well, the two ghosts in Beetlejuice were trapped in the house because that was the sort of their strongest tie to the real world. They had died, I believe, in a car accident. It was Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis as the couple. But the house was their dream home. It was everything they always wanted. They loved it. And then when they died, they ended up haunting it. And then also when they died, they had to go to limbo to be processed or something. And then I think part of the plot is they didn't like their attitude, and they ended up going back to the house in a huff. Maybe, being trapped there forever. But then there's this other weird part of it, of course, with Beetlejuice. And Beetlejuice, and you may not recall the plot, but I do. So Beetlejuice's deal is he's a ghost too, and other ghosts summon him to get rid of the living so they can keep their house. But of course, if you summon Beetlejuice, like, you kind of can't get rid of him, and he's an obnoxious a-hole and he runs amok. That they've never done a sequel to Beetlejuice shocks me to this day, because it was a fun movie, and I think it was very much open to a sequel. Even though kind of at the end, he's not really dead. Well, he was dead when the movie started, but it would be very easy to bring back Beetlejuice. Now, I think they still could do a Beetlejuice movie. I think they would want to do Winona Ryder as older. I think her name was Lydia in the movie. Either she becomes the ghost, she passes on, and is forced to summon Beetlejuice to save her house for some reason, or she's just in it. She should just be in it, and of course Michael Keaton could totally do Beetlejuice again. He's covered in makeup anyway. It doesn't matter how old he is. That they haven't done a Beetlejuice 2. I mean, it's a fun movie if you've never seen it. I don't think they would need Alec Baldwin or Gina Davis to come back. You could just skip them. Mainly because in the movie they're dead, so they have to be the exact same age when they were dead. Now, it would be great if you could bring them back and CGI them younger as they were. That would be awesome. But I don't think they would do it. I think, and now, Alec Baldwin, of course. Well, I don't know if they would cast him in a big movie like that. But you definitely could bring back Beetlejuice, Winona Ryder. You couldn't bring back Jeffrey Jones. He was in it too. You might be able to bring back. I think there were Catherine O'Hara was in it. You might be able to bring back her. I doubt. You need her. As long as you had Winona Ryder and Michael Keaton, I think you'd be good. But again, tangent. But the rules in Beetlejuice were very specific. They even had a handbook. They were a little bit complicated and had something to do with the sandworms, which I never quite understood, but somehow they made it work in the movie. Because even though we don't know the ins and outs of how the sandworms work, the people who made the movie do. They decided, no, that's the sandworms keep the ghost in the house. Somehow, if you try to leave the house, you can't. You're not outside. You're just in. You just end up going into the sandworm dimension where you'll be consumed, and you don't want that. Beetlejuice had his limits, which also made it a good movie. You had to say his name 3 times to summon him. Otherwise, all he could do is show up and kind of beg you to summon him. So, yeah, I'm surprised nobody optioned Beetlejuice to be a comic book. That would be kind of a cool comic as well. I could see that. They did do a cartoon though. They did do a cartoon. Anyhow, you don't necessarily have to do a comedy either. Now, comedies are easier. You get more flexibility, but for a more serious movie, horror movie, you'd want very consistent rules so when the character turns the tables or escapes, it makes sense. I'm trying to think of one that has really good rules that's serious. I don't watch a lot of serious supernatural movies. I can't think of one off the top of my head. I'm sure one will come to me. Let's go to the IMDb. Type in ghost movies. All right, let's see. Let's do best ghost movies. See if we got something. Best ghost movies. Nah, it's not helping me. Well, you got Ghost with Patrick Swayze, I guess. You know, that's relatively serious. He has to do certain things. I didn't see the movie, so I don't remember. I've seen enough clips that kind of know what it's about. But it's about his love for Demi Moore and his tie to the spirit world. And Whoopi Goldberg is the crazy psychic who actually has a psychic experience for the first time. So they kind of make it work, I think. I mean, again, it's movie logic. It's movie physics. And that one's more serious. It's not totally serious, obviously, but it's serious enough. In a horror movie, it would be something like, well, the ghost only shows up at a certain time, can only do certain things. The Babadook, not really a ghost, but he's kind of a monster. He kind of shows up because he sort of gets invited in his own weird way, and in the end, they manage to turn the tables on him. It's not totally clear. I don't remember the rules of the Babadook specifically, but it is tied to the physical book, and defeating these supernatural creatures often is a metaphor for the character finding something in themselves to turn the tables, and so that's a pretty common theme, and then if you do it just right, the audience kind of doesn't know whether or not there was a ghost at all, if you know what I mean. And that's sort of the best kind of movies. Was there really a ghost, or was this all in the character's head, using it as an excuse to sort of finally struggle through their personal demons? Sometimes the ghost represents a personal demon. I wrote a story called The Ghost Who Called Collect, and they made a short movie out of it. You can find it on the IMDb. And the premise is that this successful journalist gets a call he's haunted by this phone call because when he was a young man, as a young, hungry journalist, he lived in an apartment building, and I'm dating myself here, but there was a payphone. He didn't have a phone. He used the payphone out in the hall. And it was this old, beat up old payphone, and it had a particular ring because it was damaged. So he starts being haunted by that ring, and he doesn't know why. And then as the short movie progresses, eventually he goes back to the old apartment building, gets to the phone, finds it disconnected on the floor, and then starts to leave, but the phone rings and he answers it, and who is on the other end but his younger self. And it's basically represents the old versus new. And so it's a conversation between his 20-year-old hungry self and his older self, now successful, and it's a discussion about whether or not he sold out. So it's like the ghosts of the past are haunting him. And then he comes to some sort of resolution, and it ends. I gotta see if I can find that on the internet somewhere. But that's the metaphor you're using, right? I used ghost of the past. You may pick another one, like someone who's haunted by, a death. So they're haunted by a loved one who died. And that's a metaphor for maybe their guilt, maybe their love that was unrequited or something, but it's a metaphor. And you need to use those kinds of tools when you tell a ghost story, because they are not physical beings. They are irrational. In this case, for comedy, again, comedies are kind of irrational. It's more about the laughs. There should be some sort of framework. Comedies can borrow other frameworks all the time. That's not really an issue for comedies. It's not about the plot in a comedy. It's more about the comedy. But you need a central plot to hold it together. But it doesn't really matter which one, as long as it's funny. So in the case of this, I don't know if it's going to hold together or not. This one could have held together. There's a couple of different old ghost stories you probably could have used. I mean, you could have just done sort of a basic story. Introducing the internet is a big deal, though. So, but when doing these stories, again, you want to map out the rules, at least know them in your head, and let them come out in the movies, because that'll give you the impetus to solve the problem in the third act. The characters either figure out what the rules are and learn how to overcome them, or turn the tables on the ghost, or they don't and they die horribly, and you can't beat the ghost. It also makes it more sporting, right? Because ghosts are supernatural creatures that can defy the laws of physics by going through walls or making people do stuff to themselves and tricking them and with illusions and whatnot. So they need to have some sort of Achilles heel, or else it's not even a fair fight. If the ghost can just do everything, why doesn't the ghost just walk in and kill him in the first scene? So that's my tips for writing Ghost. I hope that was fruitful. Various pitfalls there. I think I covered most of them. I guess the only other one, the stuff I said about religion is true. You're going to have to figure that out for your particular movie. If you're trying to do some anti-religious ghost, good luck. There has to be something in the great beyond, or there won't be ghosts. I mean, I guess you could do some sort of reincarnated ghost system, whatever that looks like, but you have to do it. I don't know if anyone's ever done that off the top of my head. I'm sure Bollywood's done it. That's a very big thing in India, reincarnation. But there have been stories about reincarnation, but they're not ghosts. They're not spirits trapped in this world of someone who's dead. So it's a little different. But if you're going to do I would like to see if anybody has a recommendation for a movie that did a non-religious ghost, that completely devoid of religion. I'd like to know about it, because I think it would have to be implied. Some amount of afterlife belief system would need to be applied. If they use a word like hell, you're done. It's done. It's a done deal, or heaven. So just understand that going into it. But who cares? It's just a movie. I wouldn't get too wrapped around the axle like, oh, God, I don't want to do a religious movie. You kind of are, I would argue. Anyhow, that's it for me, Tony D and Little Joan. Check us out on all our various links, Odysee, Bitchute, and Rumble. We do 4 videos a day. Right, little dog? She's still a little cold from the walk. We're going to make some dinner. Thanks for tuning in. I'll be at the Blue Rascal Distillery on Sunday from 4 to 6. I'll be talking about the Pineys and the Jersey Devil. Hope to see you there, and we'll see you